Nå skal vi nemlig over til en som heter Matthew DEL. Og dette minte meg om min gamle bestemor som fortalte om at på gården i Indre Telemark i mellomkrigstida så kom det en kar de kalte linprofeten og begynte å misjonere for dette fantastiske produktet lin som alle måtte dyrke, for da kunne du både få oljefrø til maten, og du kunne få produkter da, til fiber til tekstiler og så videre. Og nå har det da kommet til oss en hampprofet, som altså Matthew DEL. Han arkitekt, og han PhD-stipendiat på AHO. Han holdt på å bygge sitt eget hus her i Oslo. Og vi ble nysgjerrig på dette her selvfølgelig, så nå gleder vi oss til å høre hva du har å si. Og det blir altså enda et foredrag på engelsk, så det ser vi frem til. Vær så god, Matthew.
Unnskyld, jeg kan snakke litt norsk, men jeg kan snakke bare barnenorsk. Jeg har flyttet fra London, fra Storbritannia for 4 år siden, og det var koronatid, vet du, så jeg bare snakket med datteren min og snakket engelsk på Zoom. Så nå jeg prøver å snakke mye mer norsk, men jeg kan ikke snakke bygningsnorsk, og det så mye smart folk i rom. Så jeg bare snakker engelsk nå. Unnskyld. So I'm an architect. I trained in London. I'm from Canada originally, and my wife and I moved here 4 years ago to curate the Oslo Architecture Triennale in 2019. And I shut down my office in London and came here and started fresh. And one of the things that you do when you're starting fresh, middle-aged as an architect, is take up great opportunities like doing a PhD at AHO. So I'm doing a PhD by practice at AHO. So part of what I want to talk about today is a kind of artistic and philosophical underpinning to a lot of the conversations that have been happening here today. And what I wanted to start with was these 3 ideas, which are my kind of suggestions to the industry, which are coming out in a book published by the Oslo Architecture Triennale now as part of the Mission Neighborhood project. So these are the kind of ideas that I want to talk about today. And the first thing is that I'm trying to find what the single project is that I can focus my practice around. And my conclusion is that it's soil. So the idea is that every project is a soil project. If we make good soil, we make good buildings, we make healthy ecosystems. And then the next question is, or the next kind of statement is, every project is a world-making project. So if we can shift our way of thinking about the building industry from object-making or solution-making into world-making, then we can ask ourselves, what kind of worlds are we making? And it's always plural, of course, with worlds. And if you are making a toxic world or an inequitable world, then it has to be seen as a design failure. And design failures become very interesting for us as architects. And then I think particularly in relation to the Trad Lab discussion, the idea of remembering, not remembering, but remembering is what I'm working with in the PhD, which is the idea that it's not nostalgic to use traditional materials and traditional methods. It's actually a process of allowing old friends back in, allowing members, remembering. And that happens both with materials, but also with non-human beings. So the focus that I have in my PhD is on a philosophy called post-humanism, which in a very kind of in an elevator pitch asks the question, who do we think we are? How did we come to think that we were separate from nature, and where has that gotten us? So the projects that I'm making as a small architecture studio, we take what we can get and we try to make nice projects. But at the same time, what I'm trying to do is to use artistic methods to ask some of these questions. And so I'll talk particularly about these 2 projects on the right. The first was a project that I made for the Oslo Architecture Triennale Mission Neighborhood, which is trying to find an example of post-human architecture that we can really attach ourselves to. And the best example that I can come to is food forestry. And food forestry is the oldest way that we have lived on the earth. There's examples of food forestry from the last 12,000 years, and there's research showing that we have actually, humans have occupied and changed the terrestrial landscape of the Earth, 3/4 of it for more than 12,000 years. And so this project is made from clay and straw and soil, and inside is a miniature food forest with 40 species of edible plants. The idea of a food forest is that it's an ecosystem which is neither nature nor culture. So it's made by us, but what it creates is a biodiversity hotspot. All of our medicine, all of our building materials, all of our food start in the food forest. And I argue we need to return as closely as we can to this idea of food forestry. So this is a sculpture made at the Old Munch Museum from materials from Oslo, or from the Oslo region. Plants that are endemic to this landscape, clay from a tunnel building project near Tønsberg, and straw from a farm just outside Oslo. And that's Ask, who's here in the audience, who was my trusty companion making this project. And one of the things we did to try to play with this idea of asking who do we think we are and this post-human idea, we listed all of the species that were involved in the making of this project, and humans are but one of them, of course. So this is an example of a food forest which is at least 2,000 years old in southern Morocco. So you have broad beans under date palms. And this is a neighborhood forest, you can say. So this is the agricultural project of a village. It provides fiber, medicine, and food to a village, and it continues to do so. This is Norway. This is in Trondheim. This is Stephen Barstow, who has more than 2,500 edible plants in his garden. So it's possible to do in cold climates. And one of the things, coming back to the idea of soil, that comes out of healthy agricultural systems is, of course, compost and heat. And so this is a project that we made in 2019 outside the Architecture Museum, where we used 14 cubic meters of green waste from Oslo Kommune to heat a bench during the autumn. So this was at its hottest, it was at 70 degrees Celsius, which is just the operating temperature of compost. And this is the project that inspired that installation, which is a community center and co-working space in London made by Public Works, which is partially heated by bioreactor compost from a community garden which funded this project by demonstrating the mental health benefits of having a community garden in a city. This is where it started for me, which was a self-built project in London where I just got into natural building materials because we were restoring a house from 1850 that was in an absolute mess because it had been inundated for at least 100 years with non-breathable chemical materials, and that's why I could afford to buy it, to be honest, because it had been destroyed by concrete and plastic, damp-proof injection and rock wool insulation. And so what we did is set ourselves the task of returning it to a stable state. So we used clay, we used lime, we used sheep's wool insulation, and we reintroduced radiant heat in order to bring this building back into a stable state. And this is where it started for me, the pleasure of working with those materials and learning what they can do, remembering those materials that built the 19th century city in London. And coming to Oslo, then I became fascinated with this material, maybe partly because it's illegal here, and maybe partly because there's a lot of confusion about what it is. So this came up earlier today. Hump and halm are not the same thing. Hump and hash are not the same thing. The reason that hemp is illegal in Norway is because of this confusion that started with the American drug wars, or the European, the kind of Western world drug wars. Hash, marijuana, come from the same plant, but come from the same species, but not the same plant. So there's very, very little THC, less than 1% THC in what we call industrial hemp. And industrial hemp produces fiber. All of the sails and clothing and ropes from the Viking culture. I've brought some materials over there, the wood chip, the fiber that we use in construction. So this is the traditional way of doing it. You mix what we call the shiv, the wood chip from the center of the hemp plant with lime and with water, and you put formwork on both sides of a timber structure and plaster it with lime on the outside. And what you end up with is a highly insulating, breathing, total wall construction, which regulates moisture and regulates temperature. It becomes something like 70% more efficient than a standard house with a similar kind of wall thickness. So in the same way as I tried to do in London, and following the kind of motivation of these artistic projects, I tasked myself with trying to make a project for my family that demonstrated this idea of world making and soil making as a practice for architecture. So we bought this piece of land, which is the kind of last bit of Østmarka that hasn't been turned into suburban housing in Uppsal. And when we bought it, it had a design for a house, which this will be familiar to anyone who's worked within the Oslo small house plan regulations. So the offsets from the boundary, maximum footprint on the site. The first time I saw the drawings for this site before we bought it, the architect hadn't even drawn the trees or the rocks. So the place had been denied, the space under what is under our feet, all that lovely clay that we can build houses out of if we stop seeing clay as a waste material, was denied. And so the first thing we did is we thought, okay, if this is one extreme, if this is the extreme of the humanist world, when we ask who do we think we are, we say, okay, this is a place already. We're not place making, we're arriving in a place. We're learning about a place. Let's make a house that doesn't take down the trees, that doesn't blast out 500 million-year-old gneiss that's in the center of the site, that is actually a really beautiful feature of the site. And so we tried to make a house, first that had the same via, but didn't destroy the landscape, and that happens in plan. And then also, we planted a food forest before the house came. So we've now planted more than 100 species of edible plants. And then we set about designing a house that also, while drawing in this old hemp culture, reacted somehow to what I was learning about my new architectural context. And this is the house, which is now under construction. And this is the garden as of this year. This was before the house arrived, and in fact, I took this picture from the Stillas. So the garden is uninterrupted by the house arriving, and the way you do that is by planting a house using carefully crafted roots, you could say. And this is the house today, basically. And what we've done with our construction is, rather than using the double formwork solution, the outer walls are made from 6 centimeters of wood wool fiber on a prefabricated timber frame. So that's what you see there on that picture. And then we cast the hemp like this, using OSB for our sins on the inside of this permanent formwork on the outside. And so you get the benefit of the wood wool insulation, 6 centimeters of wood wool insulation on the outside of the 26 centimeters of hempcrete. Hempcrete is scalable and widely tested and used elsewhere in the world. This is a wonderful project at Martin Farm in the UK where they grow hemp, and this is the house of the farmer. And in fact, this house, designed by Material Cultures and Practice Architecture, in fact also made facade panels from biopolymer and hemp reinforcement. And then I just wanted to end quickly with these slides. Hemp is the oldest cultivated material in Norway. It's the oldest cultivated material by humans, in fact. We think this is the only hemp plant, to my knowledge, in Norway, which is in a prison in the Botanisk Hage, because it cannot be denied that this is an important plant to our culture here, but of course it's forbidden. And this is guidance from 1802. But every sensible farmer should be growing their own hemp. And then I just want to end with these two quotes, which I think are very inspiring, which is to say, now that technology has allowed us to reach important goals, the next advancement consists in obtaining the same results with less technology. And the technology that I'm becoming more and more interested in, the technology of plants and the technology of soil, the true source of our analog and economy of life is the economy of plants. So, thank you.